So our next topic is hypothermia. So that means low temperature. So why is it that important? Um, the thing that happens mostly with hypothermia, and it would have to do with the bleeding, is that when somebody gets very, very cold, and it kind of gets back to our talk on shock, and this is why I spend a little bit more time on the shock part, is that different things can happen. First of all, our body, just like when we're in shock, what we'll do, will shut down peripherally. And this is why, for example, your hands in the winter gets cold first before your central, because it doesn't want to bring that cold blood back into and cool the part. So it wants to save the core at all self, and so it'll clamp the peripheral. And so that means that you have less perfusion on your thing. So that's one bad thing with hypothermia. And low temperature we're talking about. So the other thing too with hypothermia is that it plays with your cascade, your coagulation cascade. And what the hell is coagulation cascade? And so basically, when you start to get injured, your body responds. It's a very intelligent, stupid machine. It responds in certain ways all the time. And so, for example, if I cut myself, when you have like a little clot that forms there, that is part of your coagulation cascade. Because why we call it a cascade? Because one triggers another response, that triggers another response, that trigger another thing, and at one point what it does is that it forms that clot. That clot is pretty complex because it forms with platelets, fibrins, and it's a mesh of all things that basically plug that hole and start regenerative tissue under so that they can heal it, and then that thing can go. Well, when you get cold, very cold, we're talking like hypothermia. I'm not talking about just a temperature of like 36 Celsius. Sorry for the Fahrenheit. I'm not too familiar with that. But we're starting to talk about 34, 35. So people that are starting to shiver. And this is one sign of symptoms. So if you don't have a thermometer on you, when people start to shiver, they're on the medium size of hypothermia. So they're in that phase before they start going on the really, really bad path. So you want to bring them on the other side when they're comfortable again. But when you shiver, it's because you're a little bit too cold. You're more in the 35 degrees Celsius, because that's when usually you start triggering your shivering. So it's very important that when you have somebody with trauma, to keep them warm for that, because if they're bleeding and they keep them cold, not only that it will shut down the periphery that for the blood, and so there's bad perfusion, and we were talking about bad oxygenation around the body, but also cold climate and cold blood brings a lot of acid in your body, and that creates the heart not functioning as properly because the soup around it is not as good, and so the contractility of the heart, so like what we're talking about, so it's kind of cardiogenic shock. It's not to that point, but it doesn't function as well, which you need to. And the other one too is like the coagulation. So now you're bleeding, and if you don't keep that person warm enough, can bleed a little bit more and take longer to coagulate and block that hole. So even if you put like your direct pressure and you put your dressing, it may not function very well because those factors don't come and work very well. So try to keep people warm. And on that matter, a lot of time we'll see videos on YouTube of people, they have like those mylar blanket, and they put that on the person, but the person is on the ground. Mylar reflex, it reflects whatever it comes to it. So if you're on the ground and there's cold air going to the mylar and you're just putting that over the person, it's going to reflect the coldness of the ground, not the heat of the person. So if you're someone that is on the ground and has, because don't forget, there's different ways of losing heat, convection, conductions and stuff. So if you have because I bled a lot, let's say, I cut myself on the stomach or something, or I broke a bone on my leg, and my leg now has a lot of blood on the clothes. The clothes are wet. That's conduction. You have to take those clothes away. because now it's cold. Well, if I take the clothes away and I'm outside, now it's convection because now I'm not well protected. So if you're going to use those blankets, be aware that you don't leave the person on the ground. Put them in a warm environment. Take off those wet clothes, but if you take those wet clothes, be sure that you're protecting them so that you're making a shelter around them so that the convection doesn't come and take away that heat, and because of their cold blood too. So make sure that that comes out and stuff. So it's not just about wrapping them in a Mylar blanket and hypothermia is no. Keep monitoring, keep looking for their signs, symptoms. Be aware of all the different types. So if they're on the ground, if they cannot mobilize, find a way to put either a mattress under them or something to elevate them, to protect them from the ground. Wrap them nicely, and don't forget that if they're cold and you put the Mylar on them, it reflects. Well, if I cannot produce enough heat, that means I'm reflecting nothing. I'm reflecting cold. And so it's not just about putting them in even a sleeping bag works the same way. It's not just about putting them in a sleeping bag and leaving them over there. If they're at a point where they're shivering, you need to address the hypothermia. So you need to create heat somehow around it. One quick way, and disgusting way, I guess, if you're in a group and you're, let's say, hiking or something, and you have a bottle of water, throw the water bottle. You could pee in the bottle, create some heat quickly, and then you could put that around the person and rub it up. Then the heat of the urine, because urine comes out warm, could create enough heat for you to either give you time to start a fire, start your thing. So that could be another way to do it quickly right there on the scene. But it's not just about keeping the person wrap it up in the Mylar like we saw when I see a lot of time on YouTube. It's to take, again, the whole gamut of what can create hypothermia, and again, monitor that shivering. And this is the problem though with the shivering, because they can either stop shivering because they're going downhill, or they could start shivering because they're improving. So which side they're going, you have to monitor that. So if they were shivering, they stop shivering, make sure that they're going on the right way, like, that the centrally they're warm, that peripherally they're warm, and their mental status stays the same and stuff. But if they start shivering, then you're really more in more trouble. If they're not like that, they're cold still in the extremity, their mental status is starting to look more tired and things like that. So then you're going to the wrong side. But just monitor that, and in a trauma, for example, if you had a head injury, watch which one is it. Is it because they're hypothermic that they're starting to lose consciousness, or or is it their head injury? So as you can see, trauma is such an interesting topic, because it has multiple component to it that affects different systems, but at the same time makes it a very complex system when you apply it and try to give the best care to someone that is injured with it, because it's multi-system that affects each component you're trying to assess. So anyway, that was for about hypothermia. Really important to warm people up, but once you warm them, make sure also that it's not just that they don't get cold again. And so take off those wet clothes, protect them from the environment, and produce heat if you have to do in different ways, and any way that you can do. So talk to you soon.